Hello everyone, it's me Wills again, and today's little project is a painting in the style of Edvard Munch. Now we all know Edvard Munch. He painted the Scream or the Cry, and here is one of those paintings. There were several versions. This is one of those paintings, and I'm going to use that as the basis of my painting. My painting is going to be slightly longer and deeper, and I'm going to have a particular figure in. Now I'm just going to quickly put in the figure. That's wrong. The way that I want to do it. And then I'm going to start on the background. I'm not going to put this pier in here. Edvard Munch was Norwegian, but he was born on the Norwegian-Swedish border. And he suffered from mental illnesses. He suffered anxiety because he was very afraid that he would inherit a genetic illness that ran in his family, and it made him paranoid. But he was a great lover of nature, and the cry here, the scream, is really how he felt. He was advised by other painters to put his feelings down on the paintings, and this is how he felt about nature, about the death of nature. So in actual fact, he was looking at problems in nature way back in time. Okay, so I'm using graphitone. I've said before, graphitone is very handy. It's made by Cumberland Derwent, and it's washable, so it doesn't mix in with the paints. I'm actually drawing something very similar to Munch's drawing. And I won't put the hands in yet. There's the other arm. So it's almost like a wisp of smoke. But I'm not going to put in the actual horror that was in Munch's picture, and I'm not going to put these other figures in. What I'm going to do here is make this a portrait of Greta Thunberg. So we're going to go back and make this more Greta-like. Now, as we all know, Greta is an activist, a Swedish activist, and she started very young in life. This activism against mainly climate change. I think she got anxiety about what was going wrong in the world, and she wondered as a child who on earth was going to put this right. Okay, so that's some of the basis of the cry itself, the scream, but we want a more natural background here, so we may have something like trees, rather dead looking trees, and perhaps do them lined up rather like people perhaps. Greta has that type of autism called Asperger's syndrome, Baron-Cohen syndrome, where she becomes concentrated on what is being done and what is being said. And I think that gives her more insight, that helps her in her quest. So she's a very important person in the world, and she's being swamped by other news at the moment, so let's bring her back out. That's all I'm going to sketch. The rest of it will be done in paintwork, and I'm not going to use this sky. I'm going to find another sky for you. Edvard Munch, his grandfather, was a priest, a preacher. So he had a sort of a religious background. He was a very intense man, and he lived towards the end of what we would call the Victorian era. So I'm just putting a few lines on, just so I know where all these lines go. Okay, so we're going to mix some colours up. I've got a lot of paints here with me today. So I'm going to start with some yellows. So the painting we have here is called Anxiety. And you see it's actually on the same boardwalk. You can just see it here. It's on the same boardwalk as The Cry. There were more people involved, more types of people. There's a lady at the front this time. But the sky is similar, and it is the similar shoreline and the same hills. So he was rather obsessed with this particular scene, and he put different things onto it. This one has got more figurative work on it. And I'm going to go with these yellows as a basis of this. We need some free flowing work on this, because that was how he worked. So yeah, Edvard Munch was influenced by some of the Impressionists and Post-Impressionists, specifically Vincent van Gogh, Toulouse-Lautrec, Henri Comte de Toulouse-Lautrec, and Paul Gauguin. Paul Gauguin maybe for his colours. He used a lot of the sort of strokes, painting strokes that Vincent used. And it rather suited his style. He was quite of a religious man. He did some religious paintings, or what we would now call religious paintings. So the red is the next part. I'm just going to cover this a little bit. So he had a very emotional style, and I believe these colours in the sky were his expression of the way the world was going. As if the whole world was burning, things were going wrong. And some of that was his own feelings about his own life. Okay, I'm just going to putting some red in here. It's a bit too red, so I need a couple of reds. I need a sort of here we go. Oh yeah. Okay, and I'm going to mix as I go. I'm doing it in the style of Edvard Munch. This sort of trying to get emotional, trying to express his own feelings. That's what he was doing a lot of the time, and he was encouraged to do that by some of the painters and artists around him. Okay, I'll come back to the hills. I'm not going to do the hills quite like that. This is the one good thing about doing paintings in the style of great painters, and that is you can make your own choices. See, I'm not using a lot of oil, a lot of extra medium in this paint today. Paint's coming virtually from the tube, and that what gives me this mixing, this sort of broken mixing that I want on the surface. This is how Munch would have probably worked these sorts of things. I think it was all in motion with Munch. Deeper red there. The brighter red. And just looking at it, a little touch of violet. Touch of violet there. Edvard Munch himself said this isn't the cry that I've got here at the moment, but he said the cry was about all of the cries of nature, and I think that he felt that nature needed a hand, because even in his day things were going wrong in nature, and there was a lot of hunting, stuff like that. And as I say, he was a very religious man. I think he felt that it was his place to make certain comments. And he did. He made comments about both religion and nature and the world. And that sort of fits in with Greta, although we haven't come on to Greta at all yet. Because I think Greta feels like she's driven to try and put some of the world right. I'm using this guy here because it reminds me of some of the big fires we've had around the world very recently that have been put down to climate change. And the worst, I think, are the wildfires in Australia. So yeah, so they've had fires in California and places like that. But the ones in Australia, the damage that it did to the wildlife was shocking, really. And a lot of people put their lives on the line to try and get that out. And that was, we're not going to say what the actual cause of that was, but really the climate heating up was one of the basic reasons that it was so bad. So I'm popping a bit of cerulean blue next to that violet. So back to the painting. This is very Van Gogh-like. This little bit that goes through here. I don't want to copy it exactly. Towards the end of his life, Edvard said something very poetic. he said, from my rotting body, flowers will grow, and I am in them, and that is eternity. He was talking about religious immortality, almost, in that respect. So a very optimistic phrase, and really quite interesting. It means that he never sort of gave up on anything. Yeah, I think that's picked that up nicely. These types of paintings are really all about marks. And these marks are very simplistic in actual fact. They're simplistic expressions of the way the artist feels. And with Edvard here, we can almost see what it is he's feeling. I know that on the original painting some of these colours look quite random, but actually they're, well, for me they're quite well thought out. The balance of the colours and the way they're used is really quite well thought out. They have an effect on the viewer. And I think probably that's what Edvard wanted. He was very much like Van Gogh, I think, in that way. So Edvard was in the same sort of position as Vincent van Gogh. His father paid for most of his paints and materials, just in the way that Vincent's brother Theo paid for his paints and materials. But Edvard had a cousin. I think it was his cousin that told him that he should paint his feelings. But his cousin was a traditional portraitist and painter. And Edvard's father didn't actually like this cousin. He felt that he was not a good influence. One day he found paintings of Edvard's that he didn't like, that didn't suit his ethics, and he destroyed at least one painting. At least one painting of Edvard's, and then refused to forward him more money. So painting became a struggle at that point. Okay, I'm going to leave this for a minute. The detail can go in later, but we're getting some start of all the colours here. And I'm just going to put in a little bit more of the hill. I'm going to put in the dark blue of the hillside, and this is the waterline. And on this particular painting, you put the waterline in with a red edge. And I'm going to stretch the waterline, so here's Greta. I'm going to stretch the waterline around Greta, like a little halo. Just scrub that on for a minute. I've got some violet on the brush. Edvard was encouraged to paint his emotions, and he did that very successfully. It was like a voyage of self-discovery for him. He did some religious paintings, very good. Some of his religious paintings, very good. He did portraiture. He was a surprisingly good artist. Although he took to this style, it took features away. Everything that he did was very, very perfect in a way. His lines were perfect. So okay, this is a basic sketch out, and I'm now going to go to Greta, because I don't want Greta to look like the figure in The Cry. I want Greta to look more like Greta. So here's Greta. Greta's Swedish. Edvard Munch was born on the Swedish-Norwegian border, but considered Norwegian. This is a great picture of Greta. And Greta suffers from anxieties, the same sort of anxieties that Edvard Munch suffered from. Greta's anxieties are nearly all concentrated, based on what is happening in the world, in the environment. And she's got a great face. This is a face that you often see in Icelandic people. So it's going to be a great face for this, and it's going to be supplanted onto the Cry figure with some of the anxieties of what's going on about it. So I'm just going to do a little bit of sketching here. It's got a great parting in her hair. I don't want this to be too figurative. I want to still keep the post-impressionist, impressionist feeling to it. But actually the hairline itself and the braids, look at those long braids she's got there. The braids coming down here help. I'm not going to use the braid there quite so much. I'm going to bring it down more. But they help the figure. Now her chin will be more here. And she's got quite a square jawline. And a square jawline here. Her nose there. Her mouth very tight. She's got her mouth very tight. And we've got to remember that we're in the style of Edvard Munch. So we've got to work this picture as if he was working it. Right, hairline slightly higher than that. That's given me the idea of how I want Greta to look. But it rather fits in well with the background scenery. And of course there's the touch of anxiety which is in the arms. The arms here and the hands come up. So the next thing is to go back to the cry for a moment. So I'm just going to change pictures on here. So I'm going to put in the body, the wispy body that isn't really a body almost. I'm going to put that in now, and some of the darker parts, and then come up to the hands, which I've put too far out at the moment. They should be nearer to the face here. Well, I can do that in paint as I go along, and then I'm going to bring her hair in over the top. So this is going to be quite rough to start with. So I've got my palette here, still on the same palette. I'm going to put in some lamp black, good splot of lamp black. I'm going to put in a splot of violet and a splot of primary blue. Ooh, it did actually splot as well. So the colours that I've got in here already will work for the shoulder. And the arm. So here's something. I don't know whether you all know this. Greta's second name is Tintin. She's got a lot of names. I can't remember them all, but I know her second name is Tintin. So she's Greta Tintin, and she uses before Thunberg her mother's maiden name. Her mother is an opera singer, was an opera singer. Greta pressurised the mother to sort of give up her career to some degree, because she was quite a famous opera singer, and that meant world travel. And that upset Greta. She didn't like the idea of her mother going on all these aeroplanes all over the world. And so she asked her if she would stop doing the travel part, and that to some degree closed her career. Not entirely, but when Edvard had finished the screen, or towards the end of the screen, he said that painting the screen had stretched him to the limit. He said that he could feel nature itself screaming in his blood, in his whole being. And I think you can see that. I think that you can see that actually in the painting, that it is a painting at the limits. You see, I'm just dabbling bits of colour onto my brush. That's what Munch had done when he did parts like this. This was a painting that was stolen and disappeared from the world for quite some years. And then I think it was Interpol tracked it down. But it was a long time gone. It was certainly in the hands of crooks for quite a lot of its life, but has been retrieved and is back on show, back on exhibition where the world can see it. So Greta started quite young, feeling anxious about what was happening with the world climate. I think she did a bit of reading. I think she was 8 when she started suffering with the anxieties of what was happening with climate change. And in 2018, was that 4 years ago, she won an essay competition set by a Swedish newspaper. And she said in it that she wanted to feel safe. She said, how could she feel safe when she's in, or we're in, the greatest crisis of all time to do with climate? And I think that showed some of her anxieties, some of her feelings towards what was going on in the climate. Right, that is one hand, but it's not in its final colour. And this is the other hand, also not in its final colour. So this beyond here will be the shoreline. I'm adding a wave to it. When you do things like this, when you do paintings like this in the style of, you have to do your research and you have to look in depth. Whoa! I got carried away then, everybody. You have to look in depth at how the painter works and why they're doing what they're doing. And for Munch, he had a set way of working that was a little bit old-fashioned. And as he started to express himself more, he did borrow from other painters. He borrowed from, here's Toulouse-Lautrec. Here it is, here. This is pure Toulouse-Lautrec. And for parts like this, when he dotted in colour, lined in colour, Vincent van Gogh. And then some parts of it, Gauguin. Those were the main painters that influenced him. Toulouse-Lautrec himself, great painter, a count, a French count from the area of Toulouse. So he was Comte de Toulouse. Henri Lautrec was his proper name. And again, his sister was his greatest follower of his work, greatest supporter. He did a lot of his work in Paris, where he drank very heavily. He was addicted to absinthe. and it was slowly making him a little bit crazy, but he did some paintings and some advertisements that kept him in money to drink. And these were the types of colours that he used. Fantastic colouring. So I'm going to have to start running some proper blues in here. And I'm going to have to start going back to the sky and putting decent detail in Munch's style. In the cry itself, the scream, the cry, he's on the boardwalk in, I believe, Oslo. He went to Art Academy in Oslo. It wasn't called Oslo then, but you know, my memory's awful. Can't remember what it was called. But now Oslo. But we will take Oslo away and just use the hills, and we're going to bring in a burnt forest, just a few trees of a burnt forest, and a pathway in the forest for Greta to walk down, much more fitting to her cause. Okay, so we're going to paint Greta's face. Now she's got quite a strong face, strong features, but Munch didn't tend to overwork the features. He liked the things to look ghostly. So I've got to draw a sort of a medium here. So okay, I'm just going to put some colour on. I've got a few colours on here. There's a little bit of pink. I'm not going to use lots of pink. He tended to have these ghostly colours. And I've got white there. So I'm just going to work it as I go. I think that's a good comparison between the real Greta and what would be a Munch Greta. I think that does the job almost. A little bit of detail to go in later. We'll come back to the detail. A little bit more work around the eyes. A little bit of shadow here. I think we'll be okay. Just using the bit of white that's on the brush. And then the hands are in the wrong place at the moment. So I'm just going to put them back into white. So Edvard Munch must have done a lot of mixing actually on the painting. Just the way his paintings come out, that must have been what he'd done. Okay, that will do for the moment for Greta. So we'll go back to looking at the background. Right, so I'm just going to scratch on the background of here. So I've picked up the brush that I was working with. I haven't got a lot of the paint mixed, but I'll do this as I go. Right, I'm just going to use a dry brush here, around here now. What I want to get is that sort of fuzzy edge. That Munch has in the cry, the scream, whichever you want to call it. And this dry brush sort of brings those strokes together. Okay, so we're just going to try this white, creamy white. I think that's as near to Munch as I want to go on the face. Okay, so the next thing I think will be fill all this space. And then we need a little pathway coming through a burnt wood. So we'll put the sea on, we'll fill this in, and then we've got this burnt wood area. We may have a few little bits of flames and things like that. Right, so I'm just mixing this pinky sandy colour for this area, which I think is the deeper shoreline. So let's have a quick mix of these. We'll say that's done for now, apart from down here. I'm going to go and have a look at the sea and the tidal part and the shoreline now. So, back to Edvard Munch. Edvard Munch's grandfather was a preacher, a priest, I think he was Catholic. And his father was named Christian Munch, after his grandfather's profession, really. And his father was a bit pious. He didn't agree with Edvard being an artist. And sort of railed against it. When Edvard was very young, 5 years old, his mother died. And his father rather tormented his children. He used to read them horror stories and frighten them when they were very small. And I think Edvard sort of retained some of that in his later life. Let's get a bit more orange into that. So Edvard got into art school in Oslo, I believe, and his father was always against it, tried to stop him from being an artist, thought it was a depraved, but Edvard went to the academy. I think he was a very good student. But his work had a profound effect on him when he started finding this style that he had. So he did a lot of these dark images that took a lot of time. He worked on them for a long time. And they had a profound effect. He himself said in the end he was completely mad. He did have some mental difficulties. I don't think they were quite as bad as he made out. But he didn't go to an asylum. He went to a sanatorium. During this period when he did these dark, meaningful things. Need a bit more yellow. And he spent some time in the sanatorium. And when he came out, he was quite well. His doctors were pleased with him. He was quite healthy when he came out, but his painting style changed. He became a happier person, and his paintings were happier. They became quite bright, sometimes quite geometric. Cheerful they had. He didn't produce any more of these dark paintings. He stopped producing these dark paintings that were about his soul. and the feelings inside, and became very cheerful and did some quite light-hearted, bright things, bright scenes. He got away from his father in the first place once he'd finished with the academy. He got away by moving to Paris, encouraged by our old friend Vincent van Gogh and Paul Gauguin and Toulouse-Lautrec. They encouraged him and supported him while he was there. I think this Scandinavian style, this deep thought, rather appealed to them. And they encouraged him to do these deep and meaningful pictures. Right, I think that is the deep part of the sea done. So they were always pleased with him. The Impressionists and the Post-Impressionists that he mixed with. They thought what he was doing was pretty marvellous. But it did have a toll on his health and his life. I just need a blue brush and a little bit of blue, and put in the little fishing boat. Out on the sea there. Oh, that was a good touch. I enjoyed that one. And yeah, so he went back to Norway. And then for the rest of his life produced bright and optimistic pictures. So it did have a better ending for him. Okay, now I'm going to fill this area with what is just like a walkway going down here. And an area of beach here. And we're going to have some burnt trees. Right, so we're just going to fill this. Drag that colour into it. Greta becomes part of the landscape, really. So, back to Edvard Munch. Munch made 4 versions altogether of the Scream, the Cry. 2 were oil paintings, and 2 were pastel colours. And he had one that he titled in German that was called The Scream of Nature, and that really is why we've got Greta here. I'm just going to move the painting along very slightly. Just going to pop a bit of red in the sky here. I'm not sure I like this entirely. So we're nearly complete, apart from some burnt trees. So the different versions of the cry are done on a boardwalk, and I'm going to put the boardwalk in, but I'm going to have here a burnt out area, maybe still smouldering. So I'm going to do the rail of the boardwalk burnt, as if there's been a fire come through, and I'm going to do the boardwalk itself to some degree completely burnt out down here. So it's a scene of devastation really, and then I've got a few little details to put in. So I'm going to mix a grey, just a sort of an ash grey really. I'm using ivory black at the moment. When I come to finish the detail, I'll probably switch to lamp black to get that darker, flatter look. So this is lamp black here. Now here I think we'll have a burnt out tree. In a lot of Munch's paintings he used this same scene area, and actually I believe there is a tree here, so we might put a piece of tree. Let's put a piece of tree. Bit more detail to do on there. I'm just going to grab another brush. I've just got these mixes of reds and yellows. As Greta says, our house is on fire, which in some countries is really coming true. We're getting towards the end now, so I'm just going to get a little bit more lamp black, some odd details that I want to get right. What this represents is, first of all, Edvard Munch and his paintings. It also represents the thoughts and ideas of Greta Thunberg, who as a child realised that the world was in a bit of a mess. And it gave her feelings of despair. So, Greta, if you're watching, this isn't a representation of you truly, it's an Edvard Munch representation. But we do want your pigtails on. I'm not going to do too much more, just a little bit of representation of smoke. I think that's enough devastation. So I think I'm going to call that done. So this is a portrait of Greta Thunberg in the style of Edvard Munch, and it's based on the cry, the scream, the shriek, however you want to interpret what he wanted to call the original paintings that he did. Don't forget to subscribe. I need you to subscribe to help the channel, to like, and to comment, and if you remember, press that bell notification so you can see what's coming up next. So it's goodbye from me, Wills, from the studio. I'm in a different corner of the studio now, you've probably noticed. And I'll see you again next time. Bye, and bye from Pablo.